everybody. Let me change my background here on TikTok for some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. Um, how about that? There we go. Wish I could change the size of that, but it'll do. I don't have that ability on any of the other live streams, I don't think. See if I can. No, doesn't look like it. Okay. All right. So, for you folks not on TikTok, you just have to pay attention to what I'm saying. For those folks who are on TikTok, you'll be able to see some of the stuff we're talking about. So, good morning. It is the top of the morning here in Diani Beach, Kenya. The sun has just risen over the beach. And we are talking about living your best life here in Kenya. One of our better programs has always been passive income via bonds for now, right? Won't last forever. It's one of those things where only the folks who get in on it early benefit. And so right now, the bond rates in Kenya are outstanding. They're typically all above S&P 500 rates. Currently, and bonds pay out twice a year. They pay out every 6 months, typically. So, if you ladder bonds, which is the terminology that we use for it, just means that you get them month after month in such a way that when they pay out, you get a payment every month of the year, right? So it's called bond laddering. And it's one of the techniques that we use to make sure that clients are able to take care of themselves without working, essentially for the rest of their life. So there are two bonds currently on offer. There's normally a smaller bond as far as term is concerned, so a smaller age to maturity bond, and then a longer age to maturity bond that's offered on a monthly basis. So this month, what we're looking at is, you'll see over here, we have a 21.8 year to maturity bond. There's actually a 25-year bond, but it's a reopening. So they're reopening a bond that they sold before, right? the the rate of return or the coupon rate on it is 14.188%. All right. So if we're rounding, we're going to say 14.19%, right? So that's like S&P 500 and a half, right? S&P is about 10%. So this is about 15%. So about S&P 500 and a half in interest getting kicked out to you every year. And you'll have that for the next 20 years, right? So 21.8 years, technically 22 years almost, right? Now, the shorter bond has only 13 years left on it. It was also a 20-year bond. Has 13 years left on it, and it's dishing out 12.8% ROI. Still better than the S&P 500, right? So there's 12.8% guaranteed for the next almost 13 years on, or more than 13 years on this one, right? At 12.8%, right? Now, you other live streams, you see me sticking my finger up, but you can't actually see the picture on the TikTok live stream. You can actually see the picture that I'm actually like pointing at above my head. So these are the types of securities, they're treasuries, that our clients will use to ensure that they have passive income, right? For the entire time they're setting themselves up here in their relocation, if they're relocation clients. Some clients will use it for their generational wealth trust, right? They're doing a generational wealth trust, and they're putting some money away for the next generation. We kind of always talk about generational wealth trusts from a level of ease, right? It's really easy because you can just put a tiny amount of money in it and let that money compound forever, right? So there's not a whole lot of stress on your back. But for people who are super serious and they're looking at, putting a significant amount of money away for the next generation or the generation after, they can also use this technique where they'll buy the bond instead and let that bond keep paying out into the trust for the next 21 years, right? So imagine you're like me, right? My son is 19 months old, right? So new kid, not even two yet. If I decide to put this bond in my son's generational wealth trust fund, then for the next, what does it say there? 21.8 years to maturity, right? So for the next 21.8 years, the government will pay me 14.188% on the money I put in, right? So it'll sit there and it'll compound for the next 21 years until, in this situation, my son would then be 23, and it would start paying out to him. Now, when money comes out of the generational wealth trust, it comes out tax free, up to 10 million local currency under the current law, right? So if law change, whatever, but currently you get 10 million a year per beneficiary tax free coming out of a generational wealth trust. So this is a fixed bond, fixed dividend bond. So this one does not, it's not an infrastructure bond, so it's not tax exempt. So there is a capital gains tax or a withholding tax that's attached to it, but that comes out before your money even comes out, right? And then at the end of the year, there's a tax certificate a withholding tax certificate that Kenya's version of the IRS, it's called the KRA, would kick out to you, and then that would be a final tax. Okay. So super easy as far as maintenance is concerned, right? So I want you guys to see here. Let's take another look at something here. I wish they allowed me to change the way the sizing on these guys, because sizing really sucks. Let me see if there's another option. Let's see how this looks. It's a little bit better. All right, I guess we'll go with this one. All right, so you can see here um, the yield and the clean price of both bonds. So each bond is on each, you know, respective side, and so you can see the breakdown of sorry, of the price of the bond year by year by year uh, after the discount and the taxes, right? So what they call the clean price. But let me try and show you the actual payment dates. Okay, good. So here's the payment date schedule. Still a little funky to see. See if I can find a better version of green screen that'll show it a little easier. All right, I guess I'll go to the hand one. All right, guess that's a little bit better. All right, so you can see the payment dates. The one on the bottom is that longer one. So you can see how the payment dates break down. And so you get two payments each year, right? You can see that last number is a year. Now the palm thing is even failing me. All right, so you can see there's two payments in each year. So every 6 months, there's a payment. You guys see that? No, you other guys can't see that. Unfortunately, it's a TikTok feature, but if you can come over to TikTok, you'll see it. All right, maybe that's a little bit better for this particular setup. So you see 2026, there's one because there's only one left in the year. And then there's 2027 in April, and then 2027 in September, right? Then there's 2028 in April, 2028 in September, 2029 in April, and where's 20? So in 2029 is the halving, right? Remember I said sometimes it'll halve. So in 2029, there's a halving. And then there's still 2029 September there in that first box. You got April 2030, and then September 2030, right? On the 14th there. So you can see how it breaks down and how over time you're getting these payments every 6 months. You can see the smaller one has less dates, of course, because there's less time on that bond above, but it's the same thing. It's not the same months though, right? So if you got the smaller one, you see there you're getting March and what is that? March and September, right? So even though they're both coming out at the same time, reopens, right? So these are not fresh bonds that this is the first time they've come out. They're reopening this bond for like a resale. So they're not stacked on the same dates, of the year. So in situations like this, what sometimes happens is that clients will get both, right? Let me bring the phone back over here, so looking at all the live streams at the same time. So clients will get both, is what sometimes happens. Because with this one, you could get March, April, and then September and October all in one shot, right? So, but one of them you're only going to get, let's switch back to that so you can see one of them, right? One of them you're only going to get 13 years, the other one you're going to get 21 years. So that ends up being the difference. So when we talk about it, I know like when we talk about it, we give like the base kind of example. And then people get locked into that in their head. Like that's the only way it works, right? Like, oh, it's going to take 6 months. We get one bond per month, and then at the end of the 6 months, there's 20 years of these passive payments coming to me every month. Yeah, we can do it that way, but sometimes if the interest rate is good enough on both sides and the timing is good enough, you can do it in like 3 months, right? Because if we buy both bonds every month for 3 months, we have the same amount of bonds that we would have had if we bought one bond every month for 6 months, right? So with the payments, with the payouts, that would hit every month of the year. So that's how you know when the payout is coming. It'll actually tell you exactly which day, right? Like if we go back to that, say it says the next payout, we can't actually see that first one, unfortunately, because of the way that this pops out. But the second payout that's coming is the 19th of, what is that? The 19th of October, right? So the 19th of October, there's a payout that's coming somewhere in April for that, but because of the way TikTok sized the picture, I can't see the first column. So the second column is 19th of October, right? So we know the exact day that the payouts are coming, right? If you look at the one above it, that payout is when? That payout is, that one's actually the 5th of October in that year. It changes when? Now TikTok is blocking me. There we go. It changes in 2030. In 2030, it goes from October to September, so it shifts in 2030. It must be a leap year. I'm not sure why that happens. Typically, it stays the same, but you can see it in advance, so you can plan for it. You always have your payment schedule, and you can see all of that in advance. See that, Eddie boy? Hey, what's going on now? So back to the stats on this one. This is open now, by the way. All right, we're talking about the bond that's open currently. So the long bond on this one, the 20-year, you're getting 14%, 14.188%. All right, the withholding tax is listed there. It's 10%. Now it's 10% not of what you pay, it's 10% of what you make. Right, so it's 10% of the 14.118% is the withholding tax. Right, so it's still way above the 10% of the S&P 500. Right, and then the short one, which is 13 years, is still above the S&P 500 at 12.873%. Right, and again, 10% withholding tax. That withholding tax is automatic. You do not need to make a tax payment to the government. Okay, let me move my head out of the way for the TikTokers. You can see the entire thing there. All right. So you see one of the bonds is called the FXD 2019-020. Typically, that last number is the amount of years of maturity. So it's the FXD1 2019-020 and the FXD1 2022-025. Those are the years they originally released because these are reopens. So that 2019 and the 2025 are the years that they are released, right? So we were talking about like when interest rate on the bonds going to like go away, right? Like when's it going to get back to normal, which is going to eventually happen. But these reopens are cool because even though they're reopening now, they have to reopen with the same interest rate from then, right? So the 2022, you're getting that interest rate from 2022 because you're just reopening the same bonds. So you can't be participating in the same bond as the folks who bought it in 2022 and have a different interest rate. You just have a different amount of time that you're receiving the interest rate. No, it's coffee, Eddie. I only drink 1 cup a day, though. I'm cutting back on coffee. All right. Any questions on how that works? You see here, there's a minimum bid there. Now, that minimum bid that says 2 million, that's a competitive bid. All right, when you bid competitively, you can try to negotiate what your discount on the coupon is, right? So everybody gets the same interest rate. But you can say, well, okay, I'm putting up 2 million, but for my 2 million, I want more bonds than 2 million purchase, or I want this percentage discount on my 2 million. So I'm getting 2 million, worth of the bonds, but I'm only going to pay you 1.75 million, right? So in that competitive arena, it's for professionals and it's for people who are dropping real money, right? Now you see above that, it also says minimum bid. That's a regular bid. So minimum regular bid, which is what all of my clients do. None of my clients are doing competitive bids. Even the ones who like have the money, they're not doing it. And so the regular minimum bid is 50,000. Now 50,000 is like $380. It's not particularly expensive. However, for the folks who want to be living on on that passive income and actually live off of the money that comes out of there, the minimum recommended amount is 1 million. So we typically do 1 million local currency minimum per bond for 6 bonds, and that would give you the ability to live without working for the next 20 years. Starting to make sense? See how that works. It's real clean. It's real easy to understand. It's one of the cool things about bonds. They're not ridiculously hard to understand. All the information is there, and it's pretty straightforward. You're going to make 14.1880% on the long one. You're going to make that 14% for the next 21.8 years, and you're going to pay a 10% withholding tax. And that's it. And this is a contract. Like, this is a contract between you and the government. So if withholding tax changes, right? You on your contract, you're set on 10% on this particular investment, right? So even if withholding tax changes, unless they pass some law and the Supreme Court finds it to be constitutional, you should be locked in at that 10%. And typically taxes go up, not down. So you'll be locked in at a lower tax rate for the life of this particular, bond that wouldn't extend to anything else that you're doing. Does that make sense? Eddie Boy says, yes, sir, on YouTube. That makes sense for you guys. All right. Now, this is the current bond that is open now, right? I can go get old prospectuses of things that have passed or whatever, but I wanted you guys to see what is open now, right? You can see, let's see. I got to get out of the way so you guys can read it. You can see it's talking about the CBK DHOW CSD. So people were asking about where they buy the bonds, right? And so that this thing right here over my shoulder, if you're on TikTok, this thing right here, DHOW CSD. It's an app. Right now, there's a website too, so you can go to the website and sign up on the website. But it's an app, okay? And so you would apply for an account with that app. Right now, you might need some things, like you might need a KRA pin and that type of stuff to be able to really get into that app on your own. If you can't get in on your own, if you don't qualify because you don't have the right documentation, then you just have to use a broker. That's all. So we have a few clients that use brokers, but most of our clients have already gotten their paperwork through us, so they just qualify to open up their own accounts. And then the folks who are, utilizing it as a funding strategy for their trusts, their trust has the proper paperwork, so their trust owns the account in the trust's name. So it's like we have a bunch of Americans who they invest in, but they stay in America and they pull the money back out to America. They typically use brokers. But the folks who are relocating here, they'll use their trust or they'll use their personal account. All right. Any other questions on that? Payment schedule. I'm going to go back to the hand so you can see the whole thing, even though the hand gives you a bit of a smaller viewing area. See, all right. So, all right. I guess that's as big as I can get it. But you can see here on the payout schedule that you get paid every 6 months. That's why the strategy is you buy six of them because that's 12 payments. And if you're strategic about it, your 12 payments come in all 12 months of the year. So you get one lump sum payment per month until you're done. And once you're done, there's the payments there. If you're on TikTok, you can see them. Once you're done with the term and the bond matures, so they say, once that maturity happens, you get your original money back, right? So at the end of the 20 years, give or take, like this one's 21 years, right? So there's times where you'll get like, the best bond available, there's 18 years on it. There's 25 years, there's whatever, right? But give or take 20 years later, you'll get, 6 million local currency back after all of the money that you've made on that local currency over the years. Okay. So you're literally acting as a bank. That's what bonds are. Bonds allow citizens to act as a bank for the government. So the government is taking a loan from the citizens and paying the citizens back a set amount of interest. That's how all treasury bonds work, right? Corporate bonds, they work the same way. It's just that it's a corporation taking a loan from the citizens and then paying back the citizens interest. And they're typically shorter. So right now there's a tax exempt corporate bond open with Safaricom, which is a big company. It's like T-Mobile, right? But it's only 5 years because it's a corporate bond. Now that 5 years, I mean, anything can happen at any time, but I would be incredibly surprised if Safaricom ceased to exist in the next 5 years. And the reason for that isn't just that they're a cell phone company, right? Because we could imagine T-Mobile not being there in 5 years because it's just a cell phone company. The difference with Safaricom is Safaricom owns the mobile payment system that's used all over Africa, right? That was invented in Kenya. In like Western Africa, they call it mobile money. In Kenya, they call it mobile money too, but they call it mobile money in Swahili, which is M for mobile and then Pesa for money. So they call it M-Pesa here, but it still, translates out into mobile money. So the mobile banking system is owned by Safaricom. So, almost like if, it's not even like Apple Pay because it's like a legitimate mobile banking system. Like the government uses this system for you to pay for like government services. Like you can pay your taxes in M-Pesa. So it's not like Apple Pay. It's not like anything we have in America actually. So it would be the equivalent of if T-Mobile owned all the ATMs in America, like all of them, every single one on every corner, everywhere, in every bank, right? So it's the equivalent of that. And so that's why they have a little stronger staying power than like our phone companies. So you might look at it on the surface and be like, well, it's just a cell phone company, But if M-Pesa disappeared tomorrow, the majority of Kenyans' life savings would disappear with them. Like a lot of Kenyans, like all their money is in M-Pesa, right? Which speaks to the trust that Kenyans have in fintech, that like their entire paycheck, everything goes right into their cell phone and they don't have any problem with that. And so M-Pesa is a pretty strong company. They're doing a green initiative, so they're not like asking for debt for like payroll or anything like that. They're doing a new initiative. They don't want to pay for it, so they're taking a loan. Instead of taking a loan from the bank, they're taking a loan from the people, and they're paying the people back 10.4%. Because it's a green initiative that they're taking the loan for, the government has agreed to make their bond tax exempt. So it's a tax exempt bond that pays 10.4% interest, tax exempt. So they're essentially matching the S&P 500. Right, so it's like, well, you could do the S&P 500, and who knows what's going to happen, or you can get a guaranteed ROI of the average of the S&P 500. Like when people say this matches the S&P 500, it's about the average, the historical average of the S&P 500, which has been about 10% historically, 10.5 historically. So they're essentially paying out that same amount on their bond for the next 5 years, but it's 5 years, so it's a lot smaller than some of these treasuries. Do I mean T bill? No, I don't mean T bill. Even though they come from the same place, a bill is short term, a bond is long term. So, no, I'm not talking about T bills, I'm talking about T bonds. There are always T bills available. That's something. With the bonds, new bonds open every month. With the bills, there are always T bills available, because they mature in 90 days, 6 months, and 1 year. So I'm sure they have their uses, but they're not useful to us. Like for our conversation and what we do with them, they're not useful to us. You thought they were the same thing? No, they're not. Bills are short term, typically not longer than a year. Um, Bonds are long term, anywhere from 5 to 30 years. No, you can't. So there's a CDS account. What does this thing say? We were just looking at it. All right, so this says CSD, right? So CSD account is for bonds and bills, and CDS is for stocks, right? Both central bank accounts, but there are two separate accounts for those two things. So if you have a CSD account, you can get bonds and bills. If you have a CDS account, you can do stocks and security, like stocks, options, all of that, derivatives. if you know what that is, right? But they get more and more complex as you go. I think derivatives is the most complex security that you could possibly trade, in my opinion. Maybe somebody might say options is more complicated than derivatives. I don't believe that. I think derivatives are definitely the most complex, security that you can trade in, and then options being the level right beneath them. So, some people play around with them. I've never met anyone who like played with them that didn't lose money. Some people get it though. Like some people are like, I gotta lose money to learn how to make money, and like they go into it knowing that they're absolutely, gonna screw the pooch on it, but they're gonna learn how to do it from there. Some people are cool with that. So it's a matter of that risk tolerance thing. You know what I mean? But the people who do that are typically wildly successful. Like if you can burn some money and learn the hard way, they typically get it. I don't recommend it because that's beyond my risk tolerance. But the folks that I've seen do it, you know, it's interesting working with the trust business because you get to see folks who are using trust funds, and so they don't care as much. Like it just doesn't hit them as hard, but they do really well because of it. Because they're not so emotionally attached to their money because they didn't, work for it themselves. If they have the proper education, they make intellectual decisions with the money, not emotional decisions, which is obviously a great thing. Most people can't claim to do that if their blood, sweat, and tears went into making the money in the first place. So it's another benefit you give the next generation when you set up your generational wealth trust. You allow them to approach money from a logical perspective instead of an emotional one. So money doesn't like cause depression to those folks. Okay, so I need to gather some paperwork in order to open a CSD account. This is going to be a process. Maybe, I don't know, Froggy. Do you have a KRA pin? If you have a KRA pin, I think that's it. If memory serves, there's not much else you have to do. If you don't have a KRA pin, then you just use a broker. Now they might have some paperwork because they have service agreements and all that stuff. Figure out what percentage you're paying them, if there's an upfront cost or anything like that. But if you got a KRA pin, there's not much. You don't have a KRA pin. All right, yeah. So then you would use a broker. Um, when our clients come in and like they don't have pins or whatever, um, we just set them up with one of our brokers and go from there. It's not particularly difficult. The broker might need some information as far as know your client stuff, KIC stuff. So, but outside of that, it's not particularly difficult. If you don't use your CSD account in a year, they will close it. So if you're not now after you buy something, like you don't have to buy something every year. So after you buy a bond, if you have an active bond, then and you never buy anything else again until the bond matures, your account will be open. But if you open the account and don't do anything with it for a year, then they'll close it. If you win a bid, which is a lot, it sounds a lot more dramatic than it is, right? So there's nobody there like it's not Sotheby's, you know what I mean, where there's someone there banging a gavel and you won. It's not like that. Everybody just says, "Hey, I want this," and the day that they close it, they'll just send out a message like, "All right, you got it," or "You didn't," because if it's oversold, then not everybody will get it. So if you win a bid, you have I don't think it's a week. You have maybe 5 days to pay. So the broker will typically always want the money that you're using to buy whatever in the account before it closes, so that when it closes they can pay the government. If you default on a bid, there's a really strong chance that they'll just block your account. Sometimes they'll ask like, "Hey, what happened?" And maybe leave your account open the first time you do it. But typically, if you say, like, if you bid on this bond and then you win it and then you don't pay them, then that's it. You're just like permanently barred from central bank. And that could lead to you being like barred from stocks as well. So don't do that. Only bid on the stuff that you're actually going to buy. Which is why for us, some people ask us like when we do our thing, we take the 75,000, we set everything up, get the KRA pins and all of that stuff, we get everything squared away, and then we start executing the plan. Some people will be like, "Well, can't I just pay you like by the month because you're buying, each?" No, you can't. The money has to be there in advance so that we're always clearing, because you're not our only client, right? So we can't be keeping track of like who paid and who didn't pay this month while we're executing on your passive income plan. So everybody pays their money in upfront. It sits in each one's individual account. And then as those months go on, we pay them out their bonds as we're moving. And then when it's done, they have their passive income. They're good to go. Everything is taken care of and there's no issues. But if you miss a payment, you could be like banned for life. So no, the bonds that have tax, that's number one. Most of them do, by the way. Infrastructure bonds are the only ones that don't have tax. But the bonds that have tax, the tax is taken out prior to the payment. So you do not need to make a tax payment. You do not need to put anything extra on your tax return or anything like that. The tax is taken out before the payment hits your account. And you know what the tax is. It's actually listed right there, right? So this is the ROI. This is the interest rate that they're paying you. And of this ROI, it's saying that 10% is withholding tax, right? So not of the amount you put in, of the ROI, okay? So for this one, for example, our clients would be getting 141,880 local units, so Kenyan shillings a year, right? So that would be cut in half because they're getting two payments. So they would get, what is it, 70,000 plus, right? I'm not going to get into the change. So they're getting like 70,000 a month, right? If everything was around this interest rate, okay, they'd be getting 70,000 a month every month, right? So it would be 10% of the 70,000 that would be the withholding tax, not of, you know, the initial million that was put in. It'd be 10% of the 70,000, right? Yeah. It's pretty fair. I mean, people wouldn't buy it if it wasn't, you know what I mean? They have to make it fair or else they're not gonna remember they're taking a loan from the bank of you, right? So that's the way that this works. So if it wasn't, you know, fair, even on the tax side, then people just loan them their money. There's no requirement that anybody, you know, they just go to the stock market or they go to mutual funds or, you know, IFTs or whatever. So it's typically pretty fair. The what? The 50 million. Where did 50 million come from? Oh, that's the max. Yeah. So the max you can do on a non-competitive bid is okay, I see. So you're seeing that there. Yeah. See, the minimum is 50,000. The maximum is 50 million on a non-competitive bid. See now, if you're going competitive, which is the line below, which is if that's professional. None of my clients ever go competitive. But if you're going competitive, then the minimum is 2 million to do a competitive bid, and there is no maximum. So yeah. So I know my head was in the way, but yeah, no, there's no. You don't have to. You don't have to put in 50 million shillings. Like I said, our basic laddering package is like 75,000. Could be 85 if you're doing a trust, but 75 to 85,000. Well, as you can see, everything's pretty well above 10%. Our kind of floor is 10%. So we project at 10%. So everybody gets more than the projection. No one has gotten the projection up to date because they're not even close to 10% yet. So with the 10% projection, then it's 50,000 a month for the next 20 years, right? But that isn't, you know, accurate currently because as you can see here, there's 14%, there's 12%. So it hasn't dropped down to 10% yet on the ROI, but that's our baseline as far as like quoting, you know, clients just to manage expectations. So our baseline is 50,000 a month. Obviously the months they fluctuate because next month the interest rate might be, you know, 13%, you know, or it could be 17%. So it goes up and down depending on what's offered. But it's never actually been 10%. So we use the 50,000 per month as kind of a base number, but most people are doing like this. Like this is 70,000 a month, and even after taxes, it's like 62, right? So this is typically what people are seeing, and like I said, it goes up and down, you know, month to month. So depending on what the ROI was for that particular bond. So yeah, while we talk about 50 a month, no one's actually getting 50 a month. Everybody's getting more than that. Why? Because that's 10%. Because that's our minimum threshold in the sense of if it goes below 10%, you may be better off just investing in the S&P 500. Like at that point, maybe the bond market is dead for extraordinary returns, right? So right now, it's extraordinary, right? You're getting extraordinary returns on these bonds. Um, we've even had people that like do real estate syndications in the U.S. And on a real estate syndication, they were getting like, I guess they were coming in saying that they were getting anywhere between 8 and 12%. And real estate syndications are not liquid. Bonds are also not liquid, but there is a secondary market. So they're more liquid than syndications shares, right? So there were folks that were just like, well, shit. Especially back when the bond rate was 18.46% tax exempt, they were like, well, hell, I'm getting 12% on a good day in my real estate syndication in Utah or whatever. I can get 18% on a bond, in Kenya. So forget the real estate syndication. I'm just going to go, rock out with the bond. So it just depends on what's going on in that person's life, how much they understand money. Like some people really don't understand money at all. And so even when they see really good money deals, they can't conceptualize them because they don't actually understand how money works, which sucks. That's why when you're doing your generational wealth trust, you got to make sure that part of your trust deed is the education that your descendants receive in financial literacy and in how money really works and so on and so forth. Because that's the number one difference between haves and have-nots, if you want to call them that, is that one group of people really understands how money works, and the other group of people really don't. And then that's it. And then they like blame systems and stuff, where the folks that understand how money works understand that like those excuses don't actually hold water. But if you're not educated enough on the reality of the thing, it sounds, plausible and feasible. So they just live there in those, excuses, unfortunately, and it sucks because then they're stuck there. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, actually. When there's something real in your way, you just move, right? When there's something real in your way, you just move, you know, which might be easier said than done, but it's always an option. That's why you see like there'll be a weird tax law or something, and there's probably more to it than just a tax law. But typically that's what makes the headlines, right? There's some weird tax law, and then 12% of the billionaires move out of that country, right? Now, granted, they're billionaires, so they're mobile, right? They can move where they want to move. But we all understand that, like that makes logical sense to most of us. That like, okay, it doesn't work, so you move, right? So when there's a real barrier to entry, typically the answer is you just move, right? Unless you're okay to wait until that barrier is resolved, which could take 10, 12 years. But if you need something done like now you just move. So we engaged with that with the SEC, right? There were SEC things that block regular people from making solid investment money in the US. So it's an excuse as well, but it's a valid one, right? So now you got to overcome this valid, situation. And so there are a couple ways to overcome it. For us, the easiest way was to just move. You know what I mean? But another way could have been, oh, we could have got licensed, right? So we could have got like a not like a Series 7, not some crazy license that's horrific to get, but like a life insurance license. I think would have probably made us investors by license, right? So there's these other things you can do. Go get a Series 66 or a Series 45 or whatever, to kind of backdoor it. So there were other answers, to that, but the immediate answer was just playing somebody else's rule box, right? So that ends up being essentially, how a lot of people execute if they need to execute immediately, So this ended up being part of that as well, because these kind of interest rates are offered on syndications. But if you're not a qualified investor, you typically can't join a syndication. You might be able to do it as a sophisticated investor, but that's a very specific regulatory filing with the SEC. And when you make that filing, you can only have 35 of those. So you can only have 35 sophisticated investors when you make that regulation filing. So it's still a pain in the ass. You typically can't advertise them under SEC also. So that's also a pain in the ass. So you just play under somebody else's rule book. All right. Any questions on how to live passively in Kenya, making passive income every month, not having to worry about working, not having to worry about any of that stuff? What about the rest of your life? I don't understand the question. What do you mean? Like you do whatever you want for the rest of your life? Yeah, give me a little bit more than that. I'm not really sure what you're talking about. Like, what will you eat? Where will you live? Oh, okay. So, what will you eat? That's the bonds are supposed to cover like your universal like basic income essentially, right? So, yes, the bond covers your food. It should cover, your bills and all of that stuff. Now, live, that can be different, right? Now, there are some, we have had clients that, excuse me, planned out where they live to be covered by the bond, right? Maybe you have to spend a little bit more money, maybe you have to whatever to make that happen. But we do have clients who have done that. Typically, though, the clients who are relocating, they purchase a house to the side of this. So they have a house paid off, they have their land paid off, they typically have a car also that's paid off, and then they do this, and that takes care of their monthly income, like moving forward forever, right? Well, for the next 20 years. And so that's how that works. But that income that's coming in, that passive income, is supposed to take care of all your basically, so your food, water, healthcare, all of that stuff, your insurance for your cars and all that stuff, and for your house and whatnot. All that's supposed to be covered under umbrella of your monthly income. Some people now, and we always talk about that baseline of 50,000 a month, right? So that's just our baseline. There are people who come in and they pay more to get more, right? So all of it is variable based on what the client wants. There's not a limit. Just because we talk about the baseline, which is the 50K, that doesn't mean that you're limited to 50K a month, right? So there are folks who've come in and they've said, look, I need 150,000 a month, so how are we going to do that? And you just pay more. That's all. You know, it's just a matter of being able to afford it. Remember the cap. Where is it? It's right here. The maximum. All right. Sorry for you guys. Oh, you can't see it anyway. You're not on that live stream. But if you were on TikTok, you can see the maximum is 50 million. Right. So the maximum is 50 million per bond. Okay. Our baseline is 1 million shillings, not dollars. Right. 1 million shillings per bond. The maximum is 50 million per bond. So up to that 50 million mark, if you need more than that, which is absurd, by the way, right? 50 million shillings is somewhere in the neighborhood of, let me think, maybe $40,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So that's one bond, right? So if you were getting 10% of 50 million, you're talking about like you need something like 2 million a month, which is crazy. Like you can buy a car here with two with 2 million. So you need a car a month. You know what I mean? Like so, no one has ever done that. Let me just put it that way. The most that anybody has ever said they needed is like 150 a month, right? Which is a lot. I don't spend 150 a month, and I have a pretty bougie lifestyle. so and I don't spend 150 a month. So that's a significant amount. So it's just a matter of how much do you want to pay in advance. And the money is yours. The money comes back to you. Like there are service fees, of course, and legal fees and all that stuff, of course. Like, it's not being done for free. But that principal on that base level, it would be six, right? So if you wanted 100,000 a month, then it would be 12, right? But that principal that's working for you comes back to you at the end of maturity. So at the end of maturity, you would get 6 million shillings back, and that is not part of the withholding tax because that was the principal. The withholding tax is on the interest. That was the original money that you put in that just comes back to you. Now there's that thing about the halving. So like halfway through, they might give you half your money back. So then at the very end of maturity, then you get half, but that's because you already got the other half, right? Typically, what happens when people get that lump sum is they typically don't like blow it. There have been some people who are like, oh, you know what? Let me go on a cruise or something. Whatever, do you? But most people just buy more stuff. Now, whether it's more bonds or not, you know what I mean? Because once you have your basic thing down, then you can start investing in like riskier things that may or may not make you more money, right? That's the whole risk to them, right? So once your basic stuff is taken care of and you ain't got to worry about money anymore, that's when you start being like, let me take a look at the 20% thing over there and the 60% thing over there and the blah, 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 blah. So that's how that happens, and those things exist. If you Google, Kenyan investments 60% ROI, there's a fund that's when was it? It was February of last year, and it did 60% ROI, a legitimate 60%. They were even investigated just to make sure, and they did a legitimate 60% ROI. That is crazy. That means if you gave them $100,000, they gave you $160,000 back in 1 year. But those things are possible in developing nations. In developed nations, not so much. You know what I mean? But in developing nations that are right on the cusp of crossing over, that's where all these big returns come from. So yeah, definitely look that up. I think that was it Arc Pro or whatever, but definitely look that up. The two kind of like standard funds that are doing really well right now are Oak Special Fund, Mansa X Fund. You can look those guys up as well, right? Oak Special Fund, Oak like an oak tree, and Mansa X funds. You want to look at their fees, right? Like one of them is much more expensive than the other, and they both have the same ROI, right? Because one has like performance bonus fees and like all these additional fees that the other one doesn't have. So your take home ROI on both of them is less than the 20%, but how much less, right? And those bonuses will determine how much less that will actually be. But those are the things that people who are not concerned about where their next dollar is coming from are very free and open to invest in. So most folks, they get their base here. Now they don't have to worry about money anymore for the next 20 years, right? Next, for in this case, 21.8 years, right? So now they're good on that. Then they can start looking into, you know, market funds, foreign exchange funds, ITFs and all that stuff, and go from there. Sinking in, everybody kind of understand what we're talking about. You got a question, ask it. It's what I'm here for. All right. We all kind of get that. Okay. Oh, that's the worst question you could possibly ask. That question almost actually indicates that you probably shouldn't even be considering this, right? So, you don't want the cheapest anything when you're relocating to another country, right? It doesn't mean that you want the most expensive thing, but the price should not be the determining factor. The value should, right? Because you're starting a new life somewhere where maybe you don't know anybody, where maybe you don't know how the law works, or maybe you don't know the systems that are in place. So you want to make sure that quality is the most important thing. So if you're in a position in your life where the only thing that matters to you is price, and you're looking for the cheapest thing, you're going to jack yourself up pretty bad. Yeah, the folks that do that typically fail in their relocation, right? So I wouldn't, if that's the mindset, I'd take a step back and make sure it's something that you can do. We never take on clients that are focused that way personally, but they'll go find someone else who will do it. And about 90% of the time, we hear from them again, and their life is screwed up and they're on their way home because they couldn't make it work because they got exactly what they paid for. So if that's where you are in life, create a plan to get away from that first, and then come back when you can seek value instead of price. And that's anywhere. Like, even if you're not working with us, you do not want to relocate somewhere if that's where you are. And it's okay to be there, but don't mess yourself up because you're there. You know what I mean? I've been there. You know, I've been homeless before. I've been all of that. So I get it, but work your way out of that before you make an international relocation. Married, but married, but what? What are you asking? Are you talking about? Are you talking about a married couple having independent trusts? That does happen. It typically happens when it's a blended family. Is that what's going on with you? Give me a little more than that. I don't know what the limit is over there on fan base, so maybe you're typing all that you can. I'll wait for you. I'm here. Just go ahead and, you know, write it out where I can understand it. Yes, a blended family where husband and wife already have children. Yeah, 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 yeah. No, we deal with that all the time. So, with a blended family, you can absolutely do that because sometimes there's inheritance issues, right? So if you already come with kids and they already come with kids, sometimes your parents might have given their grandkids X, Y, and Z, and now your parents are passed, right? So whether your parents would have been okay, including the new stepkids or not, they're not alive anymore. So no one can make that call anymore. So now their wishes need to stand, right? So there's a lot of situations where that happens, and so wife has a trust that respects her dead parents' wishes. Husband has a trust that respects his dead parents' wishes. And then they may have something in the middle for the new children that they create together or whatever. Yeah, happens all the time. And yes, it does stand. Yeah, because you guys are both consciously making it the decision together. Obviously, our legal team, writes that up the proper way. And then beyond that, it shouldn't benefit either parent. So it's a legitimate generational wealth trust that only benefits the children, and the children are the beneficiaries, and the parents are not the trustees. And then it absolutely does stand at that point. It's typically not contentious, no. You know why it's not contentious? Because people tend to marry on their level, right? So what you're typically not going to run into is someone who, I don't know, they're creating a trust, that has $500 in it, which is a bit ridiculous. And then on the other side, they're putting 5 million in it. That type of mismatch typically doesn't happen. So you definitely want to put the bonds in the trust. No, you don't. No, so you have your options. You can and the options are typically stem from where you live. So if you're relocating, you can absolutely have the bond in your name, and that bond can pay out directly into your bank account. And okay, fine. Now the danger with that is you can do something that's not your fault, and now have that bond be at risk, right? So like you could have a car accident, or somebody could slip and fall in your house, or like whatever, right? And now they sue you, and then maybe they win, and now the bond is in your name. It's your bond. So the judge orders you to transfer ownership of the bond to them, or like whatever the case may be, right? So there's risk in owning anything. And those are liability risks. If you don't want the liability risk, then yes, you could have a trust fund going, and the trust owns everything. And the reason why that works in this jurisdiction is because the first 10 million per year out of a trust is tax exempt, right? So if we go back to the 50,000, a month, then we haven't hit a million by the end of the year, right? Um, we definitely haven't hit 10 million, right? So the money that's coming out of the trust, if you're the beneficiary, the money coming out of the trust is coming to you tax exempt, because it's less than 10 million, right? So you could run it that way. And then if somebody slips and falls in your house, or you get a car accident, you don't own the bond, right? That bond is being distributed to you from a trust. And so that's not up for grabs in the lawsuit type of thing. So it's a little bit of extra protection. But you don't, it's not necessary, it's not mandatory. You can definitely just own it, the same way you would just own your car and take the risk that you might get into an accident and be sued. You know what I mean? So it's just really up to your risk tolerance again, but there's no requirement. Now, companies tend to put it in a trust, right? So companies, if people are just doing like investments and they're not moving here, they're staying wherever they're from, and they're making those investments, they tend to leave it in a trust, and then they'll distribute it as needed, because when they distribute it, especially if they're American, they're going to have to do an IRS filing for that distribution. Until they distribute it, it's non-grantor. And since it's non-grantor, they don't have to tell the IRS about it at all. But when they do a distribution, then they would need to fill out an IRS form and report that distribution. So sometimes they won't do a distribution for years, or until they need it, then they'll go ahead and do a distribution against it. So yeah, it's all your personal plan, whatever's going on in your life, whatever kind of assets you got, and how litigious those assets are also, right? So if you're a doctor, you own a medical practice, right? And there might be a lot of lawsuits that come out. Like maybe you own a medical practice that's highly litigious, like plastic surgery, right? Like where you didn't make a mistake, but the person just isn't happy how they look, so they sue you, right? Those kinds of people have a lot of trust. So if you are in a litigious industry, then you typically have a lot of trust to protect assets and inheritance and all those things. If it's not very litigious, then you may not have any trust, right? So it's just a matter. It's the same thing with like the generational wealth planning that we do. You could do it without the trust, but if anything happens, those people can just take everything you saved for your kids because you own it. With the trust, it's protected. So the trust is just a measure of protection. You have to decide whether you need that protection or not. Anything else on that? Why would they need multiple trusts? Because different trusts do different things. The more things you make a trust do, the more weaknesses it has, typically, right? So you don't want to stack things in the same trust. Plus, you don't want trust to become more valuable than your risk tolerance, because people will try to bust your trust as well. It's really hard to do, but if it's valuable enough, they'll take a shot. But American courts can't come after Kenyan trust. I mean, they can, right? So they can. What they'll do is they'll make an order, right? Their order isn't necessarily respected by Kenyan courts, but they can make an order, right? So let's say, for example, you get in a car accident in America, and they find out that you have the trust, right? And if they ask you, then technically you would have to disclose, if you're associated with any trust funds, whatever, right? You can't perjure yourself, right? So they find out that you have a trust. And so the judge says, I order you to request a distribution from the trustee to cover the $1 million that we find you liable for in this car accident that your insurance didn't cover. Right? Now you have to comply with the court order, especially while you're in their jurisdiction, right? Or they're going to drop a bench warrant where you're going to go to jail, right? So the trust has to be designed in such a way that the trustee doesn't comply, right? So if you were to ask for a distribution from any trust that we've created, the trustee would immediately swear you in under penalty of perjury. So now you're sworn in just like in court, right? What a judge can't make you do is perjure yourself. No judge can order you to perjure yourself. So now you're sworn in, you cannot perjure yourself. Is this distribution request the result of a court order? You can't perjure yourself. You have to say yes. As soon as you say yes, the trust deed, which is the document that governs what the trustee can and can't do. The trustee can't just do what they want unless you set it up that way, which is ridiculous. But the trustee can only do what you said they can do. So in that trust deed, it'll say there'll be an article in there that says after anybody requesting a distribution says yes, this is in a result to a court order, or yes, I'm under legal duress. The trustee has no option but to deny the request, right? There's no wiggle room. They can't use their own judgment, none of that, right? So as soon as you say, yeah, the judge ordered me to ask for this money, the trustee says, screw you, I'm not giving it to you. And that's the end of it, right? So you complied with the court order, you asked for whatever you were supposed to ask for, you did what you were supposed to do, but the trustee is just not cooperating with you because that's the way the trust is designed. right? And so that money will just never leave, the trust. Now they can do like an order, like, oh, if the wire comes in, we intercept the wire, and all, but then obviously that just never happens, right? Um, so that's how protect those assets. And then what do? Then you work something out. You know what I mean? Because in that case, you actually do owe something, right? But you've actually gotten the upper hand after losing the case now because your assets are protected. So then you end up that means that lawyer probably isn't getting paid either, right? So the lawyer is now not getting paid. The person that you owe whatever to isn't getting paid. So now you can go back and be like, look, and $1 million. Like, do you want to settle here? You want to create a settlement deal, whatever, maybe we settle on 100,000, and then everybody gets something, or everybody could just sit there and get nothing. And you can still obviously relocate to the jurisdiction where your trust is and start getting paid again, right? So that's how that protection essentially works. But yeah, I mean, an order can definitely be raised against you. In some jurisdictions, which is why you have to be careful where you put your trust and not just put it any old where, is sometimes they can take the judgment from the U.S. court and file the judgment in the jurisdiction where the trust exists, right? So you want to make sure that you're dealing with the jurisdiction where they're going to require standing, or they're going to require some like significant bond or something in order for that to happen. So like when you're dealing with like Cook Islands, you have to put up $1 million bond to even bring that lawsuit, right? So most people are just like, all right, I got to put up $1 million up front to even file the lawsuit. So that doesn't happen. In a lot of other jurisdictions, it's a matter of, is there standing in this jurisdiction, right? Did the thing happen here? No, then you can't file the judgment here, right? And so typically that's why the offshore trusts offer greater protection, because your domestic trust, if it's under the jurisdiction of the same judge, they can just invalidate the trust and essentially just destroy your trust from the bench. Even if the trust would have protected, they can just say, F that, like, sue me. You know what I mean? Come after me on appeal, take me to, you really can't sue a judge, but come after me on appeal, bring me up under judicial review, do what you got to do. But I'm breaking your trust. You know what I mean? Proceed from there. And then it's broken. It is what it is. But if it's offshore, then they can't do that. That's the whole point of the offshore trust. As far as protection measures, there's obviously more points to it than that. But as far as how it protects, that's it in a nutshell. Countries that Nigeria. We've seen folks that had like a Nigerian trust, and then they came to us and got a Kenyan trust, and then they had a default judgment. I think it had something to do with I want to say it had something to do with like a mortgage or something in the U.S. And they were able to file the judgment in Nigeria, like freeze their trust in Nigeria. So you got to that happened because the person came from there, right? So they were like, "Oh, I'll have a trust in my home country." That doesn't matter. Like, it has to be the right country, not just a country you know about or a country you like vacationing in. It has to be a country that's going to say no to, the country that you operate in the most. And if you're American, sometimes it's the country and the state that you operate in the most. Because there was one where somebody had like a Jamaican trust. I don't know why, but they had a Jamaican trust. What state were they in? Was it Pennsylvania, maybe? But they were in a Commonwealth state in the United States, which there's only 4 of them in the United States, Commonwealth states. So because they were in a Commonwealth state, there was actually a colonial Commonwealth treaty between the colony, the former British colony that was now a state, and the former British colony of Jamaica. So they were able to use like old colonial law to go after the trust, because they were both British colonies at some point in time. So you just got to have a professional that looks through it. This is where like the chat GPTers screw themselves up because there's no way that they're going to get that answer from anything like that. There's no way that they're going to get that answer from, you know, some, random TikToker or something like that. You need a professional that can get in there and be like, oh, wait a minute. There's old colonial laws still on the books in both of these places that can circumvent what we're doing. So you need to choose a different nation, you know. Sometimes it's not a nation. Sometimes it's a region. That happens, yeah. Like what? Like the Isle of Wight. Isle of Wight's in the UK. It's not a nation, but a trust in the Isle of Wight is ridiculously stronger than a trust that's based in London. So sometimes it's a regional thing. Typically, the regional things have to do with like kings that passed certain decrees years ago because somebody saved their life or something like that. You know, like that's how the Cayman Island thing works. That some, they weren't king at the time, but some royal person ended up being saved, and then they became king later, and then that's where they did like, they're never going to pay taxes to the crown, blah blah blah. And so the whole Cayman Islands thing and like their banking dominance and all that came from that, years and years and years ago. And so sometimes you'll have these like little regions that are better than others, even though they're not countries. Monaco's another example of that. Hong Kong, another good example of that. Hong Kong is part of China, but it's an SAR. It's a special administrative region. The Vatican is both a region and a country. It's a city state. So it's a country that's a city, right? So that's a little different. But there's a bunch of little regions out there. Zanzibar is another one. You know, Macau's another one. What does that say? What does that say? Oops. All right. Oh, okay. TikTok gives all this like instruction behind the scenes. So sometimes TikTok is talking to me, not you guys. Hey, Nova, how are you? I can't tell until I read it. All right. Yes, yes, we spoke about Oak Special Fund a little bit earlier. Yeah, they are 22% ROI. Oh, you can. Sure, you can. Yeah, if you want to do that, you can. It's just more risky. It's just medium risk. You're not guaranteed that ROI. So it's just, but if you have faith, in the fund managers and all that, and you believe based on your research that you're always going to get 22% with Oak Special Fund, you do that instead of a bond and see what happens. The bond is for people who want guaranteed, right? So they want guaranteed passive income. That's all. I don't see your original question, so maybe that's what TikTok was telling me. Maybe they blocked it, but I see hello. I meant allodial title, but the I meant there was nothing before I meant that I saw. So maybe there's a word in whatever you wrote that caused TikTok to block it because TikTok did flash something up on the screen. So reword the original thing because all I'm seeing is I meant allodial title, which isn't a question. I'm not sure what that means. And then I see down there. What's the live about? Can you explain? So we're just talking about how some of our clients set up a universal basic income for themselves when they relocate to Kenya. They do it through a process called bond laddering, where they guarantee themselves a certain amount of income per month for 20 years. And that's typically how they make sure that they have money when they relocate here. So that's it in a nutshell. That's what we're talking about in a nutshell. We've been talking for an hour and a half, so but that's the short version. And I am still waiting for you to resend your question, Nova. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. How to do that is the money month. How to do that is the money month. Just take a look at what you wrote there. Correct it for me so I understand what you're asking. Oh, is the money monthly? Yes. The money is monthly. Yeah. So every month, you get one payment from the government. Yeah. And the amount that you get would be based on whatever the return on investment is. So, for example, this is the current government bond that's open, and the government says that they guarantee that they'll pay you 14.188% for 21.8 years, right? And that they're going to hold 10% of what they pay out as a withholding tax. So the taxes are already paid. You don't have to worry about paying taxes. And our basic in the local currency is a million. We typically buy it at a million. So this one would be that you would get 141,880 Kenyan shillings a year, which would be a little over 70,000 a month. And so this every bond pays out twice a month. So when you bond ladder, you need to buy 6 bonds so that you have a payment every single month. And then you make sure that you buy bonds that are in the same year range so that for the next 20 years, in this case it's 21.8 years if you bought this one over here has a different interest rate, which is 12.873%, but it's also a much smaller time, so it's only 13.2 years on that one. So you just line them all up where they're as close as possible as far as the maturity time. So we like to have it to be about 20 years. And then you set it up so that the payments happen the way you need them to happen, which, let me see if I can show you that. Where's the thingy? All right, so there we go. So, like this is like a payment schedule for that bond. So as you can see now, there's a column over here that you can't see because TikTok is weird with how it formats images. But as you can see, as you go down, there are 2 payments 6 months apart for the entire life of the bond. So like this one is the way they do dates, here is different than the way we do dates in America. I don't know where you're from, but 17/4 is April 17th. We would do 4/17 in America. So understand what you're reading if you're watching from the US. But 17/4 is April 17th. And then the next one is it would be 10/16, right? So that's the way that bond pays out up until 2047. So you see the last payment there is on the 23rd of September 2047. That would be the last payment. And on the 23rd of September 2047, you get your full investment back, right? So once you're done, the entire investment will come back. That's just how bonds work in general. There's no nothing special going on with the bonds there. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no problem, Nova. I didn't see. I don't know if you tried to re-ask your question, Nova, but it never came up. So I don't know what you were asking there. Sorry about that. I don't know if TikTok's just blocking what you're trying to say or what. The Central Bank of Kenya. Yeah. So right there at the top above my head, Central Bank of Kenya. So it's not like I'm offering a security and it's a private security or anything like that. It's all government treasuries. Nope, don't have to be citizens. Most of our clients are not citizens. Our immigration firm will get you to citizenship, but before you're a citizen, you can't necessarily work, right? Because you don't have like working papers, right? So when people come here, they got to figure out how they're going to come here. So so you know, this is one of the ways that they pay for their lifestyle while they're here. We just contact a bank. You can, if you want to, yeah, contact a bank, and then they'll do like a brokerage program with you. How much for how much, however much you want to pay. It says here the minimum is 50,000. 50,000 is like $380, and the maximum is 50 million, which would be like uh, $38,000. Now you can actually do more than that, but then you have to do a competitive bid, which is like a professional thing. Most of our clients don't do that. What am I offering? So my firm either helps people expand their business here, set up generational wealth, trust funds here, or relocate here. So depending on which client I'm talking to, this presents itself in a different way. Some people will buy these bonds, like this one pays out twice a year, and it says for 21.8 years, right? So this one would pay out twice a year for the next 21 years, point eight. And so you can create up a trust fund for your kids, not for you, generational wealth trust fund, and let this thing keep paying that money into that trust fund, and then your kids will get that money tax free, right? So you can build your generational wealth this way. So that's one thing that some of our clients do. Other clients move here, right? They relocate to Kenya, typically from America. They relocate to Kenya and they essentially retire, right? So they relocate, they put up like 75,000, which will allow us to buy 1 million 6 times, because you get paid twice a year. So in order to get a payment every single month, you need 6 of these, and you need the payouts on each of them to be a different 2 months. So January and June, February and July, March and August, right? So that's the way it's supposed to work. And then you would get, a check from the government for the next 20 years to support you while you're here. And then at the end of the 20 years, you get your money back, right? The principal that you paid in, you get it back. So for the people who want to move here but know that they're not going to be working a job, this works for them as well, where they can come in, they can put some down, and that allows them to get a passive income for the next 20 years, right? So with businesses, sometimes businesses can do that, and that they'll put in the startup capital, and then they'll let those monthly payments come out, and that'll be their monthly budget, for the first however many years. So is the rate better than the U.S. or the same? What's the difference? Been doing it here. Oh, between doing it here or there. Yeah, so the difference is like you're looking at 14.1880%. So just look up what a U.S. Treasury bond is paying out, right? And you'll see the drastic difference. 14% is better than the S&P 500, right? So Google, what's the ROI of the S&P 500, and you're going to get like 10.5 on average, right? So on a guaranteed government bond that's not as volatile as the stock market, You know what I mean? You're going to get 14% here. And each bond is different. We've had a bond, the tax exempt infrastructure bond, that was 18.46%, so almost double the S&P 500, right? So that happens because it's a developing nation on the cusp of becoming developed, right? If it's like a brand new developing nation, then you don't get these either, right? So this is like a limited, time in a country's development, where the bond market goes through the roof. The next phase is the stock market's going to go through the roof. And then when the stock market expands, the bond market will retract. Typically, when stocks are up, bonds are down. When bonds are up, stocks are down. It's typically how economies work, especially market economies. But yeah, this is just for folks that want that. They want to make sure that they don't have to worry about money for the first 20 years of their relocation until they like really settle in, or folks that want to have a generational wealth trust that keeps paying into itself, but not with a foreign asset. That typically matters to Americans, because with Americans, if you put an American asset into a foreign trust, it becomes a non-grantor. It becomes a grantor trust. I'm sorry. If you go to irs.gov and plug that into the search bar at the top, what is a grantor trust? What is a non-grantor trust? A non-grantor trust means you can't directly touch the money, so you don't need to tell IRS anything, right? And then you only need to do an IRS filing when there's a distribution to a U.S. citizen, right? If it's a grantor trust, it means that you're touching, right? Which could include you making a payment to the trust to grow the money in the trust, right? So if you set up the trust as a non-grantor trust, and then you use this bond where the bond is making monthly payments into the trust, but not from America, you can keep your non-grantor status and not have to involve the IRS. But research that yourself. Look that all up on the IRS's website, and get the definition of what grantor versus non-grantor trust is. Hey Kev, how's it going? Where do you begin? Yeah, with the typically with a consultation, all of these accounts that are streaming now are business accounts, so all that information on how to contact us is in the profile. What happens if you have dual citizenship? It depends on the countries. If you're dual citizen and one of those citizenships is American, America taxes you for having a passport. There's only three countries in the world that do that: North Korea, Eritrea, and America. Horrible list to be on. Yeah, man, good to see you. Thanks for sharing a lot. Yeah. So that's the only thing. That's the biggest downside to the American passport. I have one too, but the biggest downside is they tax you for having a passport. People used to just give them back. There was a guy named, is it Eduardo Saverin? He's actually one of the founders of Facebook. And then Zuckerberg, pushed him out in a way that you know, he claims was unfair. And then Zuckerberg settled with him. It was a sizable settlement. They did an out of court settlement and settled with him. He made, you know, instant billionaire type of thing, right? Um, he gave up his U.S. citizenship and moved to Spain right before he got the settlement, so he paid no taxes on it. So now, if you look it up, there's actually a sovereign rule. They named it after him. So now, if you give up your U.S. citizenship, which we typically don't actually recommend, but if you give up your U.S. citizenship, you actually have to pay for it now. So it used to be that you could go to any consular officer and literally just tell them, like, you go to any consular officer, it had to be a consular officer, which means that you couldn't do it in the United States. So you had to go to any consular officer outside the United States. You could just give up your citizenship in front of the consular officer. You can't do that anymore. Not that that's necessarily a great idea, but you can't do that anymore because you now have to pay to stop being American. so, so that was their answer to Savin. It's called the Savin rule. And so that was their answer, that the next person who gets billions of dollars got to pay that tax bill before they lose their citizenship. So, yeah. So it just depends on which citizenships you have. Different citizenships are going to have different requirements on you. So that's like our clients that are doing generational wealth. One of the elements to that they typically engage with is called the passport portfolio. And so the passport portfolio is a plan of how many dual citizenships you're going to get around the world for very specific reasons. Typically, citizenship access to their capital markets, right? Because there are some capital markets that are incredibly stable. So, like somebody said that they were from Trinidad, right? Now, Trinidad's not part of the EC, but like Grenada, right next to Trinidad, is, right? The EC dollar is incredibly stable, has been for years, right? So, for maybe the last 20 years, one US dollar, no matter what the exchange rate of the US dollar was, has been $2.50 EC, right? For years. Incredibly stable currency. So you might want access to that currency market. Hold on 1 second. You might want access to that currency market, and you might want to be able to take developmental loans and stuff like that from the EC bank. So you might want like a Grenadian passport. You know what I mean? So that would be in your passport portfolio plan. Where you're like, all right, I'm an American. I'm building my generational wealth. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. So my first passport is a U.S. passport. The next passport is maybe a Grenadian passport, and maybe I'm going to get the Grenadian passport by citizenship by investment. All right, great. The next passport is going to be maybe the Cayman Islands passport, Grand Cayman Islands. I'm going to get that by buying property worth more than X amount of dollars, because that's maybe how their law is set up. All right, great. Now the next passport is going to be Vanuatu. I'm going to go get a Vanuatu passport. And so it gives you the freedom to be able to access capital markets, to be able to move the way you want to move, when you want to move, and all of those things, because you have this passport portfolio. Like during COVID, I was able to move during lockdown because I had a passport portfolio, right? And so people can't keep you from going home, right? So I was able to move to those countries that I had passports for, and not be locked down, um, just because of the pandemic or whatever. So there are definitely some added bonuses and benefits. Sometimes you activate tax treaties, right? There are things called DTAAs, dual tax avoidance agreements, which are treaties between countries that say if somebody holding my country's passport has to pay taxes in your country, then we're going to treat the taxation this way to avoid them paying too much taxes in both countries, or paying taxes in both countries, period, right? So you access some of those things. So it's just a strategic tool that are used by people who are serious about generational wealth, to make sure that their families have as many opportunities as they can afford them. And then there are countries that make you give up your citizenship to have their passport. Some of them are worth it, some of them are not. You know what I mean? When our generational wealth clients get to a point where it's appropriate for them to have a family office, one member of the family typically becomes a Singaporean citizen, right? So and in order to do that, they have to give up the rest of their citizenship. So the entire other, passport portfolio goes away for that particular individual. Um, but it's worth it, right? What Singapore gives them in return is worth it. Then you have countries like Tanzania that attempt to do the same thing and they give you nothing, right? So in order to get the Tanzania passport, you got to give up all your other passports and they give you nothing in return. There's no reason to do that. So in some places it's stupid, in other places it's incredibly smart. So it just depends on what the strategy is. How do you make sure your kids follow the plan? Yeah, so that's all about the education. The money is actually the easy part. So if you don't know why the money is the easy part, then you need to Google compounding returns, okay, and figure out how compounding works, right? So you can literally put $100, in an account as long as it meets the minimum. Like here, the minimum is what, 50,000 Kenyan shillings. That's like $380, right? So in this particular example, the minimum you could put in was $380, right? But you could put that $380 in here, have a trust own it, and have that money for the next 21.8 years be getting paid into that trust. And then the trust deploying that money in other investments and making more interest, right? That's called compounding. So in that 20 years, the $380 that you put in this trust can be over $100,000, right? In 60 years, it could actually grow to like $1,000,000, right? Just off of that, the initial $380 that you put in there. That's called compounding, right? Money will always outwork you. You cannot work harder than money. Okay, but the money needs the time to grow. So that's why the money is the easy part, especially if it's legitimately for the next generation. When you're trying to use the money for you, time works against you, right? But for the next generation, you let that money sit there and compound and it's going to blow up, right? So the money is the easy part. The hard part about generational wealth is the education. You have to make sure, especially if you're using, the trust model like we do, you have to make sure that there's education built into the trust, that they get financial literacy, that there's annual meetings for trusts. So at every annual meeting, you want to make sure that there's education modules for the kids. You want to make sure that there's a family constitution in place, so the morals and the values and everything that you want around that family is in place, and everybody understands it and everybody knows it. And it has to be, a full family system. So there needs to be holidays, and there needs to be traditions, and there needs to be all these things that you do to keep, cohesion in the family. And the most important thing that we've learned over the years that has to be in the family constitution is a conflict resolution article, right? That in detail explains how the family deals with conflict, because conflict will come up. And with undisciplined families that don't have a constitution, that are not serious about generational wealth, that one conflict can split the family right down the middle. Where this side of the family ain't talking to that side of the family, we ain't spoke to those people in years and don't even remember why, right? Which stupidly weakened the family, weakened the earning potential of the family, weakened the dynasty potential of the family over some nonsense. Where if you have already a conflict resolution article built into your family constitution, and you can go through that process unbiased of who likes who in the family and who's the black sheep and who's the favorite, because that system is in place, then you can solve problems that would have otherwise tore the family apart and allow the family to keep growing and keep building generational wealth over multiple generations. So that's the answer to your question. That's the hard part. The money is absolutely the easy part. The hard part is the dedication to the family. And most people don't even get past step one. Most people aren't selfless enough to take care of their family above themselves. So they'll put all the hopes and dreams for the entire family on their ability to be successful as an individual, and then think that they're going to be successful, and then leave that success to their family members, which is statistically the worst way to attempt to do it, versus just using compounding, right, where they can compound any amount of money, over time will compound to $1,000,000. Any amount of money. You can start with a quarter. It might take 200 years if you start with a quarter, right? But any amount of money with a 100% drip will compound to $1,000,000 eventually. Now, if you're starting with a quarter, is that realistic? Is it worth it? Not necessarily. But you gotta shift your mindset, based on facts. Like, we're not talking about manifesting and hopeful thinking and all of that, whatever. You gotta shift your mindset based on facts to how things actually work, right? You can compound any amount of money to $1,000,000. You can compound any amount of money to $1,000,000,000, right? You just don't know when it's going to happen. It's going to take a crap ton of time, right? So the better your plan is, the faster you get there. But it's never short. No matter how good your plan is, it's never short. Even if you started, with $50,000, it would still take like 10, 15 years, right? So compounding is about time, which means it can't be to benefit you. It has to be to benefit them. You have to love your family enough that you care about them more than you care about your wealth in the moment, where you can guarantee them wealth, 30 to 60 years from now that you might never taste. And so most people, aren't selfless enough to even get past that first step, right? So, and for us, we typically see the folks that are doing it kind of as a throwaway. They're typically very old. They don't got much years left, and now finally they get it, right? Now they're seeing their grandkids and they love their grandkids so much, and the blah 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 blah. So when when the grandkids could have been taken care of, by them 30 years prior, now they're in their 80s. Now they drop 5 grand, in an account for their great great grandkids, because now we still got to let the 5 grand sit there for the next 30 to 60 years, until it can do something, for their generational wealth. But unfortunately, until folks are facing their last days, they're just not selfless enough to change the destiny of their families, and it's been that way forever. The percentages have always been the same. The percentages of people who build dynastic families versus the percentage of people who make excuses not to, or have been the same forever. So it's just up to you. It's just on you. There's plenty of ways to do it. There's the way that we do it, but there's plenty of ways to do it. You can do it any way you want. You just got to do it. Right, yeah. Well, I mean, so you can almost leave that to the trustee to a certain extent. Oh, I'm sorry. For the rest of you guys on the other live streams, the question was, how do you know which education to give them? Because the education will like shift, right? Like maybe blockchain education is going to be like really, really important in 30 years. Maybe, right? We'll see if it's a dead end technology or not, right? But maybe it will be. So you can't necessarily predict that. So you want to create criteria. And so like when we're writing out a trust deed, our lawyers, will get into that much deeper than I will here, but you'll create a criteria by which things can change as the world changes, right? Because there might be something that we literally have never heard of because it doesn't exist yet, that's going to be super important in the next 60 years, right? The same way somebody creating a trust in the 70s, the internet didn't exist. Right? So the internet did not exist. So they weren't thinking about, internet transactions and wireless transactions and things like that. So you have to leave enough space in those articles and in those clauses in the trust deed so that, as technology increases and as the world changes, the trustee is able to make changes that are in the spirit of the original trust, right? So that you never allow them to violate the spirit of what the trust stands for, but the method, you might allow change, because there are societies, and this is actually one of them. Possibly it could go cashless because they trust their electronic transactions so much, partially because they invented it for this region. But there are societies that could absolutely go cashless, right? So if there's no wiggle room in your trust deed to not make cash deposits, or not write a check, then you could get to a place where like there's a bunch of money in your trust, but because you didn't go to a professional to write the trust deed, it's stuck there now. Because maybe your trust says that you have to make distribution by check on December 15th of every year, and now all of a sudden checks don't exist in that country anymore. And the trustee does not have the latitude to change the method of distribution, right? So that's where the professionals come in. There's certain things you just don't want to do on your own. You want to make sure that a professional is guiding you through it. So some of that information you may not even have, right? So you're talking about like, what education do we pass on to the next generation? You might not even have the education, which might be why you're not operating at the level that you're setting up them to operate at. So you might not even know what they're supposed to, what they're supposed to learn, what they're supposed to know. So that's where you would leave it to the trustee to use a fact-based process, right? Where that trustee now has to defend the decision with fact-based research and like, okay, the research shows this is the education that the most successful people have, and so that's the education that we're passing on to your next generation. If you know what education it should be, or if there's something about your family that needs to be passed on education wise, then that's fine too. A lot of the top families in the world and the top families that we've dealt with, arts education is big, right? You wouldn't think so, but it's huge. So that's something that gets passed on within the family. Jobs was like that, right? Steve Jobs invented the iPhone. There wasn't an iPad in his house. The kids came home and had to talk about art and music at the dinner table, not technology, right? That was factored into his family constitution, right? So inside the house, there was none of his products were inside his own house, and his kids weren't allowed to use them until they were, of age, and they had to gain an education in arts and mathematics, and deal with technology later, arts, mathematics, and science. So it just depends on what it is that you want for your family. There's no right or wrong answer as far as what you want for your family. There has to be an element of financial literacy, though. They have to understand how money really works, which most people do not. Right? So, which means that there's a good chance that you do not. So that means that you're going to have to put into your family constitution, or actually your trust deed, that legitimate financial literacy has to take place for those kids. And then that's something that sometimes even your trustees will fly people out for, right? So we have one family that they have their annual meeting every year in the Seychelles. And they actually pay like Harvard professors to fly out for the weekend and teach their kids at the annual meeting, right? And so the Harvard professor gets a free trip to the Seychelles. They pay for an entire week. They pay them as well. They give them their Airbnb or whatever the case may be, so they get a bit of a vacation. So they have like 5 days of vacation, and then they have 3 days where they have to teach the kids financial literacy. These are like Harvard, professors that are teaching, what is it? Not accounting, forensic accounting at Harvard, right? Teaching their, 12 and 13-year-old, kids financial literacy every annual meeting, right? So it just depends on what your focuses are. Those kids are probably going to have a very easy way path getting into Harvard as well, right? So things are strategic sometimes, right? They didn't not choose Oxford professors because they weren't available. You know what I mean? They picked professors for strategic reasons. Couldn't you just send them to schools that teach that? Some of our clients do. Those schools are expensive, right? So we have one client that sends their kid to a Swiss school called La Rose Institute. It's expensive, right? It's over $100,000 a year, but it does teach that, right? The curriculum at the school is probably unlike any curriculum you've ever seen. So there are schools like that all over the place. Most of them you've never heard of. It's not like Harvard, right? There's schools like that all over the place, but they're elite, and their price tag matches that level of eliteness. You can, if you have the money, you can. I wouldn't make it mandatory in my trust deed, though. You know what I mean? because then now you have to come up with that money. Bringing in a tutor might be substantially more cost effective, especially if the trust hasn't compounded that much money yet. And remember, with every generation, there's going to be more and more people in that family trust. So, Karu Kulkum. Karu Kulkum, bro. Let your kids learn life. Is that supposed to be curriculum? Did you make curriculum and then say that the kids should learn from life and not be educated? That's a little bit telling, my friend. Dynastatic families don't leave up to chance, right? So they've planned out how this thing is going to go. They employ professionals. They're not surprised by anything. Their families are incredibly business savvy and incredibly powerful in business because they're not individuals, right? So they don't operate as individuals. And yet, certain societies will push you to operate as an individual and act like independence is the best thing in the world, whereas dynastatic families understand that that's the worst thing in the world. And because of that, individual business people can't hold a candle to them, can't even touch them. Well, I mean, I guess philosophically, the first step is to make the choice, right? But beyond that, you want to choose the outcome, right? Which is the family constitution process. So for us, there's 101 ways to skin a cat. For us, family constitution comes first, right? Once you got the family constitution worked out, everything else will kind of show itself to you. Give me just one moment. I will be right back. I'm pausing the live. I will be back in about 2 minutes. I don't know if I can pause the live on YouTube, so I might have to end it. Or I'll just leave you here. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Sorry about that. All right, sorry about that. I am back. Oop, it took down the image. Let me get that back up for you guys. All right. So yeah. So we start with the family constitution. Most important part of the family constitution is conflict resolution. That has proven to be the most important part in the family constitution for the last almost 20 years. And then beyond that, uh, financial literacy is probably the second most important. Health is definitely the third most important, right? So you definitely want to make sure that there's a health program. I'll get to that in just a moment. You definitely want to make sure that there's a health program in there as well, right? So like solid fact-based nutrition, information, things of that nature. So those are probably the top three things, and then you want your morals, your values, your goals, your blah 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 blah, to move forward from there. Uh, on a journey of retention. You being a married man, have you? I don't even know what that means, bro. All right. So that's the answer to that. Does that answer the question? Yes. Where did I went to the bathroom? Nature called. I've drank 2 bottles of water on this is 1 liter of water. I've drank 1 liter of water on this live. Here talking. This is another half a liter of water. So that's what happened. Yeah, the health part. There you go. If you guys have been following me, you know I had a kidney stone recently. It's the first one ever. But then they analyze the kidney stone after they get it out, and they let you know like what went wrong. So that's awesome. But super super recent. So I'm still hyper watering. Hey, King's mama. Yeah. No, no. And I guess that's something that folks that don't have money say, I guess, because I used to say it too when I was broke. But it's not, the money doesn't really fix much of anything. It's the opportunities, right? Money tends to open doors to opportunities, right? But it's the work that you do once you walk through that door that changes everything. It's not the money. I get it though. Like I said, I was homeless at one point in time. So when I was homeless, you couldn't tell me nothing. You could not tell me that money was not going to fix the situation, right? So I get it. So meet you where you are type of thing. You know what I mean? So if that's your truth and your moment, and you're not going to be able to see past it, like I understand that. I've definitely been there, but only work only work changes you. Only work fulfills you. It just doesn't have to be a job, right? It doesn't have to be employment, um, and it doesn't have to be business either. You know what I mean? There's a guy actually here where I live. There's some European guy. I've never actually spoken to him. He looks crazy and he's rich as hell, right? Crazy beard, ripped up t-shirts, barefoot walking around half the time, dirty, you know what I mean? And he's like multi-millionaire. He literally walks up and down the streets of Ukunda, which is like the local village closest to Diani, right? here in Kenya. I don't know where this white guy came from, but he literally walks up and down and picks up the trash on the side of the road. And like that's what gives him purpose. That's the work he does. Right? And he like cleans, like literally single-handedly cleans the entire village every day. And he has like a mansion and he like, he's super duper rich, right? But that's his work. You know what I mean? That's the work that does it for him. That's the work that fulfills him, and that's it. So it doesn't work doesn't mean job or employment or like, whatever. But the having the money gave him the opportunity to be able to do that and still eat. Right. So the money was just the opportunity for him to do whatever work, fulfills him, and that happens to be the work that fulfills him. Right. So it's the work, 100% the work. Not necessarily a job, but it's the work. You gotta accomplish something in life. It just doesn't have to be what other people want you to accomplish. You know what I mean? It can be your own thing. It can be nothing to everyone else. Your accomplishment can be bullshit to everybody else. Who cares? But you gotta accomplish something and feel right with yourself. That's actually the easiest one. Yeah, that's actually the easiest one. That how you teach health, that's the easiest one. That's just pure fact, pure fact. Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm new here. Thanks for your platform. Researching options for relocation. Are there social services in Kenya to assist people with developmental disabilities? Gotcha. That can be similar to like in the States. Yeah, Kenya has like an ADA. I forget what they call it. They don't call it the ADA, obviously, because we're not America. But Kenya has, an ADA, and so there are programs and there's outreach and there's, all of that stuff. And obviously, it depends on the disability, right? So, yes, the general answer is yes. They do have framework in the law to make sure that people with disabilities are protected, and they have like extra things for those people who have those disabilities, even up to like transportation stuff. Like there are these special scooters that only people with like physical disabilities are allowed to have, and ride like on the street with and stuff like that. So yeah, medical is at the same level as the U.S. So yeah, for the most part, everything's the same there. Sharon, is Sharon there? Can you bring a charger, the charger that's next to my office computer? This phone is dying. I don't know why. They were all at about the same level, and the other two are at 50%, and this one's at 15. Must have something in the background. Yeah, no problem, King's Mama. Yeah, not a problem at all. And again, like you're gonna have to get specific, with your research. You don't have to publicly get specific, obviously, but you're gonna have to get specific with your research as to what the disability is, because it may be a disability that's uncommon here, or it may be a disability, which I don't know if I call this a disability. I guess it's more of a mental illness, but it may be a disability that works differently here, like schizophrenia. Schizophrenia works completely differently here, according to the psychologist that I was speaking to. And apparently, in the U.S., you hear voices that tell you to do criminal things, right? Here, they actually hear voices that tell them that they're amazing in the like voice of their ancestors, but it's so overwhelming, like the goodness that the voices are telling them they possess is so overwhelming. It's like an unrealistic level of perfection almost, that they end up doing harm to themselves because they can't live up to the praise that they're hearing. But obviously, they don't go, mass pew pew, movie theaters and stuff like what happens in the United States because the voices are telling them something different. So certain things actually change the way that they present from region to region and country to country. I guess based on cultural norms. So Diani is basically where the expat community is that you offer. I don't really offer an expat community. I don't actually believe in them. Typically, expat communities do more harm than good because they typically get elitist. Even if they didn't want for it to happen, there are businesses that will cater to them and actually like businesses owned by locals will cater to the expats and actually kick the locals out of their businesses. So like they'll be doing it to themselves, but it still creates that type of situation. So while we do build like neighborhoods and stuff like that, we never present it that way. Anyone can join the neighborhood. So and we've never built anything that was all international clients, right? So like right now we're building what I guess we're building like 8 houses in a specific area, and like half of them are Kenyans and half of them are Americans, right? So we don't really focus on a separate community in someone else's country, right? Some people are really into that and like they go do that and that's fine. Just doesn't jive with what we do. But we do build communities. They're just not, you know, isolated to expats. And expats are technically temporary. So if you're an expat, you're going home. So when I lived in China, I was an expat because I knew I wasn't moving to China. I've immigrated here, so I'm not an expat here, and most of our clients that move here are not expats here; they're immigrants here. So that's the difference between an expat and an immigrant. Right? Yeah. No, I don't. We don't do. Like everyone who lives around, like some people are from other places, because it's a good place to live. Like if you pick a good place to live, all the folks who can afford a good place to live are going to live there. So the local people who can afford a good place to live are going to be next to you. There's people from France, there's people from Germany. There's a guy who lives next door to me now. He's African, but he's not Kenyan. He's actually South African, right? So like, if you're living in a good place, everybody going to be living there. But there's no, I can't even think of anyone who does that here specifically in this area. There are no like communities that are kind of set up for like one person. But that does exist in Nairobi, like, and it's not even all like American communities or expat communities per se. Like, there's a Somali community where like only Somalis live there. There used to be a German community. I don't know if there still is. But the area, the like ritzy area in Nairobi called Karen, that Karen is a European, like the what is the person that's named after, and she was not a nice person. So I don't know why they haven't changed that name. But anyway, so there are areas that where that happens, but we don't participate in that. Uh, Autism specifically, yeah, there's a lot of support. There's a lot of support for that. Yep, a lot of support for autism. Definitely, I would actually just run a search for autism support and then the word Kenya, and put them in quotes so you get like a more targeted search, and you'll see a bunch of organizations open up on that. Now, I think you had started by saying social services, and I had meant to gain clarity on that, because until you're a citizen, you can't like reach into like the tax money, right? So if that's what you mean by social services, I think there are some things that are available to everyone, and those things come from like NGOs, but like government provided things are for you know taxpayers and citizens. Now, eventually you hit that mark, like if you relocate with us even before you're a citizen, obviously you become a taxpayer and you're a resident and all that, and you can access certain things. But I wasn't sure what you meant there by social services. Yeah, Vision. I mean, I we still get stuff like where are the Black Americans at, like where and we just don't engage in that. There are certain groups that do, and like they kind of, I don't know, they like isolate themselves or whatever, but we just don't engage in that. You'll also see that like our clients are never complaining about being ripped off. They're never complaining about being overcharged. Or never, and then those people who do have their little clique are always complaining that like they get treated different, but they're acting different. So, you know, so I don't know. There might be a correlation there. Okay, cool, 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 cool. Right, right, yeah. But there's a lot. There's a lot. And I think like even here there's like four international schools, and I think international school has like NGO funding for stuff like that as well. So I don't know how old the person is you're talking about, but if they're school age, then the school you choose may have a lot to do with, what's available to them as well. Why are there pricing differences? It's called value-based pricing. We do it in America as well. You just might not know about it if you're not a service provider, right? But if you're a service provider, then you're very, very familiar with value-based pricing. So if you own an ad agency, for example, and you run an advertisement for Coca-Cola during the Super Bowl, but it's a 30-minute ad, and you run an advertisement for the mom and pop gas station on the corner, and it's also a 30-minute ad. You are not going to charge the mom and pop gas station the same for the 30-minute ad that you're going to charge Coca Cola during the Super Bowl for the 30-minute ad. There will be millions in difference in that charge, even though you are providing the exact same service. Create a 30-minute ad for me, right? There's a value base to the pricing, right? And so that's typically how the world works, not Kenya, right? That's how China worked when I lived there. That's how the Philippines worked when I lived there. That's how countries in Europe even work. Like Monaco works that way, right? So the this one price fits all thing is really a Western concept, and primarily a United States concept. We don't like haggle in markets and stuff like that. Most countries like do. So that's all it is. It's just, people that are locked into their thing acting like wherever they come from is the universal standard for the world. And so then they're acting like everything that's different is wrong, which is a horrible mentality to have if you're going to be living in other people's countries. Right? But that's where it comes from. So they feel like they're being ripped off when it's literally a universal pricing model. And they have a say in it. Like in our pricing model, you can't walk into a 7-Eleven and be like, I think this sandwich should be $1 instead of $2. You can't, here you can. You have a say in the price because it's value based pricing. So you have a say in like, "Ah, I don't think it's worth that to me. I think it's worth this to me." And the vendor might say, "Oh, okay, yeah, you can have it for that." Yeah, anytime, King's Mama. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being new here. Sometimes if I'm talking about like a visual, those visuals can only be seen on TikTok. Actually, wait a minute. Did I just learn something over here? Let me see something. Maybe I can bring the visuals over here. Ooh, it looks like I might be able to. Okay, I'll work on that. Looks like I can do it on YouTube as well. Yeah, it does look like I can do that. Let's see what this looks like. Uh-oh. But it's the same kind of, it puts it in a weird position. Okay. But yeah, so if I'm talking about an image and you can't see it, it means that that image is on TikTok. So if you want to see something that I'm talking about, just run over to TikTok and you'll be able to see it. Is everybody alive? All right. All right. Right? I don't even know what happened. Yeah. All right. Any other questions on any of that stuff? Are we good? What are we at? 2 hours, 25 minutes? We have no other questions. We understand how to live for the next 20 years on passive income and not have to work. We get it? Got it. Awesome. That's what I'm talking about. All right, guys. So tomorrow I'll be talking about immigration classes. So we'll talk about the different permits and which permits do what, how long it takes to get them, and all of that stuff. And then we'll probably also talk about land conveyance. So how do you get property? How long does it take for that process to go through, and all of that? Same time. I'm here at like 6 a.m. my time, which is something like 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Um, and then until we're done. So what time is it where you are right now? Eddie, it's 9:33 where you are. Okay. It's midnight, right? It's 12:33 midnight for you, Vision. Okay. Okay. So then when I start like so it's essentially been 2 hours and 30 minutes, right? I've been on for 2 hours and 28 minutes right now. So if it's what did you say it was it's so we're talking about like 10:30 at night I come on for you. So right around there, right around 10:30 at night I come on. I wake up at like 30 in the morning, but the sun doesn't come up until like 5:50, right? So I don't go live until you can see me. But I wake up before the sun comes up and then rock out from there. Oh, King's Mom, the same thing, Eastern Standard Time. Okay, cool. So yeah, right around 10 at night is right around sunrise here. So that's typically I go live every day at that time. I'm gonna try to figure something out because I know that's late for you guys. Maybe there'll be like a day where I switch things up and maybe I go live at night here, so it's daytime there. But yeah, it does seem to work though because when I go live in a day, a lot of people are at work, so it does seem to work that like they can get off work and come see me. And then people who work like overnight typically have the leeway to like flip their phone on and like in between rounds or whatever. So it does seem to work. All right, cool. Yep. So, yep, tomorrow I will be back at that time and we'll go over those things. So, we'll go over how the permits work, how long they take, and how buying land works and how long that takes. Um, and yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. It's been 2 hours and 30 minutes on this live session. So, I'm going to go get my day started. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. All right, guys. Thanks. You're most welcome, Eddie Boy. Thank you. Thanks for hanging out, King's Mama. We'll see you again soon.